So it's time to begin. Thank you for coming. I'm Jeffrey Reynolds, the president of the Charlevoix Historical Society and proud co-sponsor with the Charlevoix Public Library in presenting Deborah Richmond's story, A Cloud Over the Land tonight. Deborah Richmond, a proud descendant of the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, maintains a deep connection to her ancestral roots. Her journey began with childhood reunions, where stories of her native great-grandmother's medicinal teas and her great-grandfather's life as both a farmer and a fishing guide were woven to present a vivid picture of Indigenous life in northern Michigan. In her role, a new role, right, Deb? As the tribal historian for the Burt Lake Band, Deb sheds light on the history of the Burt Lake Band, delving into the tragic events surrounding the burnout of 1900. Deb tells the story from the viewpoint of the Burt Lake Band, and she offers an understanding of the challenges, resilience, and perseverance of her people in the face of adversity. Help me welcome Deborah Richmond.
Okay, good, not just me, okay. All right, perfect, thank you. All right, sorry about that, I'm fussing around. Thank you all for coming. First of all, this is an amazing turnout for the story I'm about to tell you. This is not a happy story, but to us, it's a very, very important story. It's one that we have never really told before. Some people have known about it, but not very much. So to start out, I want to tell you that for you to listen to our story, the intergenerational healing, multi-generational healing trauma is really, truly a thing. That was something that's happened to our ancestors, we know has affected us every generation since. And we cannot begin to heal until we can first tell our story. So first, we're now able to fully tell our story because a man named Richard Wiles, who is a researcher, he has been working with our band for at least 10 years to tell this story. He's a researcher. He's did all of the work to find out all the details about how this incident happened and everything that's happened afterward. And without that, without the work he did, we ourselves do not know the full story anymore. The level of detail that he got down to was fascinating and wonderful. And so because of him, I can now tell you the story. And I want to say to you, Miigwech Gabizin Dawien, which means thank you for listening, because that helps us begin our healing process. All right, let's get into it. So these are some of our, hey, it looks different than I see on my screen.
You get the first one.
Uh-oh. You want to fill the up and down arrow, doesn't seem to be doing it. While we're fiddling that, I'm going to start telling you anyway, because the slides are not that important. There's just something visual for you to see a few pictures. But this story began, we start telling it from 1836. That is when there was the Treaty of Washington, which gave away large swath of land from the UP, northern Michigan, and even below, from Native Americans to the US government. At that time, we had lived in Burt Lake, near Brutus, Michigan, where that is now. We had lived in a village there for hundreds of years. This is where our people are from, and we have stayed there. So when the Trail of Tears began, and it began south of here, then our families, our tribes were hearing about it, just as the other people were hearing about it. And we knew we did not want this. Trail of Tears, not only was it brutal, but when they got there, the land they were given was just not livable. for a large community. And so the tribes in Michigan knew we don't want that. So they entered into a treaty process with the US government, and the chiefs of all the bands in Michigan sent their chiefs got together and went to Washington, D.C. to negotiate a treaty. And basically what they said was that we know you have settlers were coming in droves. We know you have more people coming. We know you need land. We want to make sure we have our homelands protected where no one gets to encroach upon them. Thank you. Oh, you're so good. Thank you. So this is a picture of ancestors. One of the things about telling the story is whenever the story has been told before, and it hasn't been told very often, but if it's been in the newspaper here and there over the years, they always talk about the men who perpetrated this crime, but they never talk about the people. And so I want to show you some of our ancestors. This would have been right around the time that this would have happened. And this is the Shenandoah family that is in front of their log cabin. This is as lumbering had started coming in. And so a lot of times that the men are working for sawmills. And so this is just a super fun. I love the look of this suspicious young girl as she looks at the camera. This is my great-grandmother, and she, this is about in the 1960s. She passed away in the 60s. She was fully native, as you can see, and she actually lived on Burt Lake with her husband. Different from the village. She married a white man, and they bought property right on the lake, and they operated a farm. And so she was a farm wife. She was also a midwife, because in the community, they were right next to the whole community of our band. She would help with the birthing of the babies. She knew a lot about the medicines, and she always had, according to my mother, she always had a jar of water that looked like dirt and roots and nasty in her refrigerator. And if you didn't feel good, she'd make you drink some. And apparently it didn't taste good. So, but you got better. Her medicine was good stuff. So she knew a lot about that. When the story of the burnout came to me and my generation through whispers, because when I was a kid, we would go back up to Burt Lake and we'd have family reunions, and the grown-ups would be talking, and we hear, what are they talking about? And they would tell us, oh, go away. This is not for, go play. You know, the grown-ups are talking. They were often talking about the burnout, and so I would hear, they're talking about the burnout, we're talking about the Indians. And then as I got a little older, I found out there were Indians that lived over there, and that they on the point, and that they were burned out. And then as I got a little older, I wanted to know more about this. As I became a teenager, a young adult, I wanted to find out where are the books on, where are the people who will tell me the full story? Where are the books I can find to read this full story? There were not any. It took me years to realize there's not going to be anybody who appears, as I meet more people in our family, who's going to be able to tell me the story until now. So that's why this book is so, so important to me and to all of us, because it tells the story. So moving along, here's what I was showing you, the 1836. Michigan was not a state yet. All of this green area was given to the U.S. government. Much of the lower already belonged to the U.S. government. And so all the tribes within this area, they asked for some property that would be their reservation. And so we asked for 1,000 acres to be set aside. We have our chief signed the treaty. His name was Chingasamu. He asked for 1,000 acres to be set aside surrounding where our village is on Burt Lake. It wasn't called Burt Lake yet. It was called Sheboygan Lake. And he also asked for, as did many of the other chiefs, asked for payment for the land, so annuities, asked for teachers, because we knew we need to educate our kids to be able to survive in this world that is coming in so quickly, and also to learn about all the customs and laws and how we get along together. Asked for blacksmithing, so that they really wanted us to be farmers, so help us with getting the equipment we need. we already were farmers. We already had fields, but they really wanted us to start staying put. So become farmers. And so we said, all right, we'll give that, we'll expand that more. But those things we never did get. Now we did get land. So we thought. So all of the different chiefs each had a time to speak and ask for what they wanted, and then they signed the treaty. Henry Schoolcraft was part of that negotiation. They had an interpreter who was very good in both languages. He was actually native born, but had been educated in France. So he was very good at making sure everybody understands, and we did. When we got home, what we found out, when Chigasimo got home, what they found out was after they had signed the treaty, I believe it was the Senate looking at it, changed it so that it was only 5 years that we would have our land. Ridiculous, because this was to be ours forever. And so it made Chigasimo so angry that he and some of his family, they up and left and they moved to Canada because they said, you cannot trust these people. This is not happening. So we lost some of our members then. Many of us still stayed. And we were able to live there and live a good life. So living a good life at that time. This is the Parkey family, another family that was, all of these families are still with us now. And this again is them in front of their cabin. There were about 20 cabins in the village. It was a very good living before European contact even, because we had, of course, plenty of fish, plenty of food. We knew about the medicines. We knew about the plant life. Maple sugar we can make, all of the things, shelters that we can build, all the things you need for a nice, good living, we had. It's a great place to be, as we all know. It's northern Michigan. So, just a second. So what started happening is we stayed on our property, we built log cabins because now there were letters have been written from our band members to the government saying, you haven't told us where the boundaries are. They wanted it to be surveyed because we are going to start building log cabins like everybody else. Lumbering had begun. And we need to know that this is our property, and we need to be able to tell the people on the outside why this is our property. Because other people said it wasn't. There were settlers who were coming in and trying to settle, and they had to keep pushing them back off. There were people who were coming in and starting to lumber on the property, and when they did that, they cut everything. And so we'd have to push them back off. And they were asking for relief and asking for help on, how do we what are the things your people need to hear from us so that you understand this property was for us to keep. We say forever. And so they started asking, they were not getting answers from anybody as they wrote letters. So they asked for help. There was the Indian agent at the time in Mackinac was man by the name of William Richmond, not related to me, but he had been the patent officer before he became an Indian agent. He understood about the property and the patents you needed in order to claim land. The local Catholic priest who would come in once a month to the community for services, and he would travel around, and they asked him, can you please help us? What do we need to do? So what those men decided needed to be done was that we need to have you buy some of this land so you can get the patents that show it's yours. So now the tribe had some money from annuities from the treaty. It wasn't as much as they were supposed to have, but they did have some, and they had held it. This would have been like 10 to 20 years later. And so they pooled all of that money, and they sent it with the priest and with William Richmond, and they were able to purchase 2 parcels that are right where our village is on Indian Point. In fact, I think, well, here's what and this is what the parcel looked like. And on here it says that this property is in trust to the governor of Michigan. By putting that language in, and some other tribes had done it, that means that this is protected trust land, and this is yours, and nobody can do anything, can encroach upon it without talking to the governor. This was meant to be ours alone. And so we did get, like I said, it ended up being 350 acres. Not 1,000, but my guess is they were probably going to buy more as they could as time went along. But that didn't really happen. And so what was happening instead is by 1878, so 1836 was like 50 years later, tribe's been there. We've basically been able to stay. We have a church, we have a cemetery, we have 20 different families in at least 20 different cabins, nice community. We can sell, by this time there are like steamships that come into Burt Lake, and so we were one of the stops they would stop at, and we could then sell some of our baskets and things like that to tourists as they came in. We were able to earn some income. Everything was going just fine until once they bought the parcels, they were put on tax rolls. And so they would go up to the township and say, we are not supposed to be put on tax rolls. We know this. We are not to be taxed. This is our reservation land. And so sometimes, they would take it off the tax rolls. Sometimes, some years it would be on the tax rolls, some years it would be off. And they were constantly being pestered about the taxes. Over and over and over again, they had to convince the newest township person and the newest of the newest that this was not to be taxed. One of the times when it was on the tax rolls, there was a man by the name of John McGinn who heard about the taxes being owed. So this is the property, is what it looks like. When I talk about Indian Point, it is a point that is right out into Burt Lake. How many people are familiar with Burt Lake and where this might be? So it's a beautiful point that is out on Maple Bay, and it's a gorgeous spot, and it's quite large. So here's John McGinn. It's the only picture I have of him. It's not very flattering, but I'm okay with that. And this is also Sheriff Fred Ming. So these are the two people that up until now were the only people I knew names of, because they play the role in this incident. John McGinn was a land baron and a lumber baron. He was buying property anywhere he could. He was doing exactly that, waiting for people not to pay the taxes, and then he would come in and he would scoop up their properties. And that was legal, and that is what he did. He knew that this point was prime, beautiful property. Now, about this time, at the end of the 1800s, people from Ohio and Indiana started coming up to northern Michigan because it was so beautiful, and they started building resort homes. As we all know, it's a beautiful place. It is the wonderful weather in summer. So they were buying properties and creating like Bayview, those types of neighborhoods up in northern Michigan. He knew that this peninsula would be perfect for exactly that. So he wanted that property so he could sell the lakefront. And then he wanted to be able to take the rest of it and lumber it and cut down everything. And so he would come and try to, I'm going to evict you. Here's the lien. I bought it. And we would tell him, no, that is absolutely not true. That is not true. We know what we're talking about. We've talked about these things before. And so he decided if he can't convince him to leave, then he would go to the local judge, which he did, with his tax lien, and he would get a notice of eviction from the judge. Now, I don't know how much the judge knew about the actual owners of the property. I don't know if he knew anything about the people who were living there now, but he gave him that eviction notice, signed it, absolutely. And so then John McGinn went to Fred Ming, who was the sheriff in Sheboygan, and he was a well-known man there, and he was very powerful, and he got together a wagon full of 10 big, strong men. So there was a day in October 15th, 1900, that this incident happened. And in the morning, all of the men left to go to pick up their paychecks because all the men at that time would have been working at the local sawmill. Lumbering was huge. They were they were able to earn a good living, and it was very close by. They were told that day, you have to go to Sheboygan to pick up your checks. Sheboygan is 20 miles away. This is a community that does not have carriages and horses because everything we need and everything we do is very close by. We don't need to go to Sheboygan. But they told them, you have to go to Sheboygan, and each of you has to go and pick up your own check. So they did. They left in the morning. It's 20 miles to Sheboygan. It's 20 miles back. They left in the morning, and they came back that afternoon. When they left, as soon as they did, an hour or two later, when the coast was clear, then these two men came in with all of their henchmen, and they started house to house, pulling everybody out. So this would have been women and children. There was a baby, 3 months old, a mother just given birth not long before. There was a blind woman who had no idea what's happening. I just read about some of that actually today and some more of the records that I've been reviewing. And her children tell the story that she told. And there were people who were elderly. There was a lady who was like 90 plus years old. And they would grab them and out, and they would throw some of their belongings out from some reports I've seen, but I don't think they really did that much. They just got the people out. And I'm sure they were fighting mad. I'm sure they did not want to be leaving their houses. They poured kerosene on every single cabin, and they burned them to the ground. That day, we lost our property, our reservation land, and we never got our land back. So that day, that happened. It was a cold day. It started raining, to add insult to injury. And when the men came back, they were just, could not believe what they're looking at. They were just fighting mad, and they really wanted to fight back. And who did this? And we need to, have retribution. But level heads prevailed, and they said, this is not who we are. We've never dealt with things in that way. We always deal with things trying to work with what are their rules? What are the things that helps us get along with the outer communities? So they said, we're not going to go on a big hunt. And they did not. But what they had to do was they had to immediately find a place to stay. So this is 20 families. Each family has probably between 5 and 10 people in it. They had large families. They had to go 2 miles away. There was 2 or 3 families who had log cabins on another road nearby. And so they all went to that area, over to those relatives, to those people, and they most of them stayed right there. It's called Indian Road. It still is called that. And they did their best. Now, this is October. So what happened is that by October, you have fish that you've smoked and dried, you have all your crops that you have harvested, and you have things, dried and put away, and you have everything you need for the winter. You are set, because Michigan provides, the land provides. When you burn it all down, you don't have any of that. They had nothing. And so all of these people had to figure out how to survive through the winter. I'm not exactly sure how they did it, but a lot of them did stay there. And as a community, they put up, I believe, I've read some account where there were tents, any type of shelter they could devise. They might have gone back to some of their old building of shelters with the birch bark. I don't really know, but they stayed there. Most of them. Some of them did go on to walk to Cross Village, which is another, I think, at least 30 miles from there. Another long walk. They all walked there because a lot of their relatives were there from the Little Traverse Bay Band, what became the Little Traverse Bay Band, over at Cross Village. And so a lot of them walked there and settled there for a while. There was a story of a woman whose name is Nagani, and we have her picture in the book, very elderly woman, and that the story is that she walked to Cross Village, and shortly after getting there, she passed away. So, I mean, this is not an easy walk, of course, in October. So, some of the names of the families that would have lived there were the Hamlins, Nungesquas, Shenandoahs, Parkeys, Bodas. Those are the names that are our ancestral names. These families we're Masseys, we're all intertwined, and all of us are cousins by now, it's very, very fun. But the question about this, and as Rick went through to investigate this, the question that kept coming up, is this something that was illegal? Is this something that was just prejudicial? Was it something that was just ineptitude of people understanding what's going on, or was it just immoral? And it's never sure. Some people say it turns out they thought it was legal, so that but certainly immoral. So the tribe kept, again, trying to find people to help them. How can we, there was an article in the local paper, the Indians have been burned out. It was about 2 paragraphs. It wasn't a lot of it. It wasn't a big story. There were people in the area who knew that this is wrong, that should not have happened, but they really had no way of helping very much. Certainly couldn't help get the land back. And so really all we kind of heard was silence. Now, since then, this story has been very much hidden because we did not tell this story far and wide because, first of all, to be Indian in the early 1900s we have one gentleman who, as he describes it, he's one of our elders, he says, you always had a target on your back. There's always people who do not like you being there for whatever reason. And so there weren't many people who really were very interested in hearing the story. It's not a good story. There's no good answer. And so we didn't hear anything about it. This is also the time when Indian boarding schools are happening. And so everything in general in our culture just became very shut down, very hidden. You keep it very close to yourself about our culture, things that happen to us. Because as we know, the Indian boarding schools, children were not allowed to speak their language and they were punished severely if they did. Many other things. So families no longer spoke the language. They did not teach the new children language. So we have no fully native speakers in our tribe right now. There is a lot of things my great-grandmother did not pass on to my mother, her granddaughter, about different customs and different foods and different medicines. Because anything Indian, you need to live in the white world now. So we need to just keep it on the down low. And it was never the intention, but what that meant is in one generation, boom, so much information was gone. And so a lot of what we do now is to try to relearn and recapture that culture. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So after the burnout, we worked really hard to try to find someone in government, again, who will help us. What do you need to do to tell this man he is wrong? And so the government did file a lawsuit against John McGinn. There's what a fire would look like. And so this is the Massey family, just to take you through some pictures. This is another very large family. The man in the middle was very likely one of the men who was at the burnout. And this is probably a few years later, and so you can see there's nice big families. Everybody's most likely was probably the day to go to church. Everybody's very dressed up. But the Massey family is where my lineage starts to come in with Massey's. And so this is many years, one of my ancestors for sure. This is the farmhouse that John McGinn built for himself right after he burned down the village. And it's a nice big house. This is the Colonial Hotel. So this is something he built knowing that resorters are coming, and a big, beautiful hotel was probably very popular. But apparently it was only open for, I believe, less than 10 years because it burned to the ground. It wasn't us. We didn't do it. Everything would burn to the ground back then. Everything's made of wood. But then a lawsuit. So the government started a lawsuit against John McGinn to remove the cloud on the title. And so what happened was the lawsuit got started, and everything involving this lawsuit was slow as molasses. A legal process is very slow to begin with. This was one of these even longer. I believe that this lawsuit took 4 years. And the reason it did was because while we had their attention where they started a lawsuit, the U.S. government did not work very fast on working on it. I'm sure they had plenty of other things to work on. So there would be months where we would come back into court, and then we would have a different person who's in this attorney general position. He just got the case. Your Honor, I need to have time to be able to investigate this case myself and get familiar with it. Okay, you get another 6 months. Another 6 months goes by. There was a lot of turnover of different attorneys general that were working with us. And of course, John McGinn's side wasn't, they're happy for it to take as long as they need, as long as it takes. During this lawsuit, which was about 4 years, John McGinn passed away, ironically. When the judgment came in, we were ruled against. And so there's many reasons why we were ruled against. And the book is really wonderful for getting into those legal details about why we did. They kept reinterpreting they said, since you bought the land, now you do own taxes. And we tried to show them, no, we don't. It was a different governor. This governor didn't really know. And then by then they had passed the tribes up to the federal government under your umbrella. So they're saying the states don't have anything to do with it. We have to talk to these people. Lots of different ways in which misinterpretations, for whatever reason, whether it was ineptitude or on purpose, meant that we lost that lawsuit. So moving forward from then to today, many of those families stayed right there on Indian Road. Over time, as lumbering left, then so did the jobs. And so just like everybody else, a lot of our families needed to go south to get jobs, especially in World War II. There were a lot of positions down there to help the war effort, and a lot of our young people did go down there. But they always came back on the weekends, back up to Burt Lake. Never feeling like they were really downstaters. So at the site of the village, there is still a cemetery. It is that we have two cemeteries. So where the village was, there's a cemetery. We have so many different issues that happen with just everything we're involved with. The cemetery, we didn't do concrete headstones. You would do wooden crosses, and eventually the wooden crosses would fall away. And we didn't replace them. It was just not our custom. But you knew where your family was buried. As the houses they started building the houses, they started excavating into the cemetery. They were digging into our cemetery. And so we had to run out there and stop them. And my understanding was they said, well, if there's a cemetery there and you think it's yours, you need to put headstones on it. You need to put the names on everybody. And it took a lot of work, but they did do that. They went back through records and back through families, and they got the names of the people who were buried there. They put crosses. To this day, we put fresh wooden crosses on, so they're always there. And you can, to this day, drive by it. We have it fenced in, so everybody understands this is where the property is, and we still take care of that ourselves. When the burnout happened, they did not burn the church. There was a nice church there that we built. They didn't burn the church, and they didn't burn the log cabin that was the rectory for the priest. And we have a very dry wit elder who tells the joke. It's funny, but it's not funny. So you'll want to laugh and you won't want to laugh. He says, you know why they didn't burn the church? Because that would be wrong. So you never know, should I laugh or not? They didn't, but they turned it into a pig barn, and we never got to use it again. And they turned the rectory into another farm building of some sort, storage things, and we never got to use that again. The rectory still exists, luckily for us, and it's so very important to us because it is exactly the type of log cabins that we would have been in as well. And it is now at the Sheboygan History Center in Sheboygan. It's been there since the 70s. And just this past weekend, we had a rededication for that log cabin, and they put some signage there. So now that anyone who visits knows really what's the importance of that log cabin. And it's super important to us. So the thing now that we tried to do, we don't have any of that land back. We do own a little bit of land on Indian Road, and we do have a office. Our office is a single wide trailer that 30 years ago they bought used. And this is, as you can imagine, we try really hard to keep that baby in one piece, but you can imagine that it's in bad shape. So one of the things we need now is we need a community center. But we love our little, because this has allowed us to have our meetings and still continue to keep doing it. So we love our little single wide, but we hope to replace it. Reaffirmation was something we started working on in the late 70s. The BIA created a process by which you could apply to become a recognized tribe. And so We did. Now, this process of applying to be a recognized tribe, first of all, takes years. It's so much work. You have to get lots and lots of help from genealogists, from historians, from researchers, from you name it, records that we don't even have, trying to find, to document many different things. That process was very long. There's another way in which you can become a recognized tribe is if you have legislation that goes through Congress that says, yeah, here are these people, they qualify and they should be. So in the 80s, 90s, there was a piece of legislation that included the Grand Traverse Band, the Little Traverse Bay Band, and us that was asking for us to be recognized. We went down into Washington, and there was lots of testimony and in front of Congress and a lot that happened. Last minute before the vote, they took us off because the other two tribes had property and we were landless. So they took us off because they said, this might confuse issues and we want to get at least these recognized, and we're going to put you on another one and put you through. So those tribes got recognized, which is wonderful. And that's when they became the recognized tribes. Right after that happened, the administration changed. We have a whole different party that is in control, and nobody was interested in putting us on any legislation. So that one didn't work. And so then we went back to this idea of the applying. We did a ton of work for years, oral histories, everything I said before. And we did apply for recognition. And volumes of stuff we sent to them. And their decision was volumes as well, 300 pages, which you can still see online, but they turned us down. And they said, some of the reasons they said really hurt. One of them was, you don't have any land. Right? So we're like, can't even explain this to you if you don't understand already. But you don't have any land. Another one was, they would go through all of our membership, and we had to document genealogy records and very, very specifically, which we did. They then went through and decided some of these families don't belong with you. They belong with another tribe because maybe they had a relative who lived at the Sioux. Is this a Sioux family? Maybe they are. And so they said, you need to take these families out for us to consider the application. So we're like, we don't like that idea. Some of these people were actually chiefs of our tribe over the years. But they all said, we don't want to hold the tribe back, so we'll go ahead and disenroll. And then, so one of the reasons we were denied was because we don't have very many people. No, that is true. And then another one was that we could not establish that we were a people who had been there for all the years continuously till today. Well, first of all, that's really a very outdated idea for us to be able to, because families move around. All of us have family who live in different states and different countries. We're still families. For us, a lot of us had moved downstate during the World War II, but we were able to document. We have always had in our tribal meetings, especially since the 80s, we became a nonprofit because they wanted us to have a government. And so they said, you need to be a nonprofit. So we have had meetings every month. We have a chairman, we have a board, we have minutes, we have motions, we do everything that other groups do. And we've been doing that since the 80s. And before that, we have pictures, we have oral histories, we have all kinds of things about being at Burt Lake and the things that happened there. The one good thing about that is we have those oral histories now, which are golden. But that was in 2005. And that was another reason, the third reason they turned us down was because we could not prove we were actually been there all that time. And so we are still working toward reaffirmation. We will always work toward reaffirmation. We will never stop. We've been turned down in so many ways, so many times, but we're never going to stop. So our latest thing is that we wanted to reapply. The BIA said, no, you can't reapply once you have once you have already been turned down. And so we sued them to be able to reapply. And the judge ruled for us in the last couple of years, but the next process in that they have to then give us the process by which we reapply. and they just don't produce anything. And they're supposed to bring it to the judge. And we've been in front of this judge, for the last 2 years, like every 6 months. And every time she says, I'm very angry, the BIA is being very unfair, you need to produce this. And every time they do not. So this has just become just an issue that has not moved anywhere. We have a lawyer who works with us, and he's worked with us for years. His name is Bart Stupak. He is a former legislator. He has worked for us. We owe so much to Bart. He doesn't get paid. We have no money. We're not recognized. And he just does work for us all those years. So we are very much admired by many of the other tribes that are not recognized, because we have him to help us, and it makes a huge difference to at least keep moving forward. So we're never going to stop. We're going to keep figuring out what's the next step. But what we are going to do is we are going to start, we're not going to wait anymore. We're not going to wait to relearn. What we really need right now is we need to be able to relearn our culture, learn our culture in any way we can. That means arts and foods and traditions and ceremonies and language. Any of those things, we know almost nothing. And so we now have started working on, in the last few years, we've had some teachings where we've brought people in to teach us some of the different food ways, traditional foods. And it's been a wonderful project. So last year we had all these different, every month we'd have a new one. One was harvesting rice, how to harvest wild rice. It was amazing. It was super cool, very fun. We got in canoes and out we went, and then learned about the process, learned about why wild rice will go away if you don't harvest it, because the harvesting process will actually reseed it. So without it, it disappears, and we don't want it to. And so we are continuing to, we're going to do that one every year. We learned how to do ice spearfishing. Never thought I'd do that. That was very interesting. We've done some going out and discovering and being shown where different medicinal plants are, learning about the medicinal plants. We're learning a little bit about these things as we can. And that's what we want to continue to do. We want to learn more about our history. And that's where this came in. When I started talking to Rick about this, there was an author who started working on it. She was going to write it, and then she had to discontinue work on it because of health issues. And Richard, who did all the research, says, I'm not writing a book. I'm not writing a book. I've told so-and-so I'm not writing it. I'm not writing it. And then we pushed him and he wrote it. And that is huge for us to have this history. So bless his heart. We really forced him to do it, but he did a fantastic job for us. So that's another thing. We want to continue to do more work with our history. And so we're going to be doing things now to raise funds. Because we are a 501c3 organization, that means that we can use that for fundraising. That's not been something our band has really done very much of before. But now we're kind of in a new era. We've got people like yourselves who are interested in things that we're doing and interested in our culture and history. And so one of the things we're doing is we're starting to do fundraisers of fry bread and corn soup. We have one coming up in Pelston. We did one last year. It was really, really successful, and it's delicious. So in July 14th, Sunday, we're having a sale of fry bread and corn soup, and again in August on a Sunday, the 11th. And these are authentic recipes. So not only are we making the authentic recipes, but then we're also making a lot of it so that we can share it with other people as well. People have asked me, did we ever get any land back? No, we didn't. Now, you're hearing a lot about tribes in the West who are getting land back in other parts of the country. We're hopeful, there is hope that we may be able to do this. We've started conversations with a large part of our property that was our ancestral is still undeveloped, which is so wonderful because our property looks just like it did when our ancestors lived there, except for around the lake, but the rest of it does. And so U of M owns some of it, the state of Michigan owns some of it, the Land Conservancy owns some of it. So between these groups, they're trying to think of ways, and we're working with us. How can we see, make some sort of a deal? Because U of M is very interested in some way, shape, or form giving us some land back, but they also are a very huge institution, so they have a whole institution that they have to work with, not just their diversity committee. And so there's that hurdle. It's a slow process, but we're so grateful that They're working with us. U of M, who has a biostation and has since right after the burnout on our property, some of our property, they understand that they've been on our land all these years, and they've been doing a really nice job of making a bigger effort to work with us, and they've done some great things for us. We had a graduate student who came and she designed an entire healing garden for us as part of her graduate studies, and then she got a grant and built it for us, and it is beautiful. It's a beautiful healing garden that we so cherish. If it weren't for her, we wouldn't have it. Other things are happening like that. They're now starting to include us in some of their summer classes that are happening at the biostation. I'll be teaching some of this history there, so that their students have to learn it too if they're going to be there. And so there's a lot of really good things happening. And our biggest thing we're trying to do is we are going to get a new community center. First of all, we have no choice. To do that, we're going to be learning how to do bigger fundraising. And so those are the types of things that are on our plate now that we're working towards. So we're not an inactive group, and we're not going to wait anymore. We're going to just start really working and getting these things done that are the most important to us anyway. And so again, as I've said before, a biggest part of that starts with that you're here and you're willing to listen. There's also the opportunity for you, if you're interested, we have a newsletter we've just started that will go out. It's on our website, and it will go out to public, anyone who wants to sign up on the email list. And we're going to be able to promote the different fundraisers we're doing and also put some pieces of culture information in there as well. And so that's a really fun one. If you're interested, you just go to burtlakeband.org and sign up for the newsletter. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for helping us in our healing process. And as I want to say again, miigwech, gabizindawian. Thank you for listening.